Hi, everyone. I'm Amy McGrath, and this is Truth in the Barrel Small Batch Edition. Now, the big, beautiful bill is in the Senate right now, but there's a lot of tucked away provisions that you need to know about. So, today we're going to talk to a special guest about some of the hidden, really bad things in this big, beautiful bill. Stand by. Hi, everyone. Welcome to another small batch episode of Truth in the Barrel. And we're taking a close look at the threat to rule of law in our country and the integrity of our elections from two specific provisions tucked deep down in the Republicans' quote, big, beautiful bill that's in the Senate right now. And to help us understand what is happening, we're joined today by Eric Kashdan from the Campaign Legal Center. Thank you so much for joining us, Eric.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here to talk about these pretty bad provisions that we're hoping get defeated soon.
Yeah, so I have a lot of questions. So the first one that you sort of brought to my attention was this one that restricts federal courts' authority to hold government officials in contempt if they violate judicial orders. So that sounds like a lot. What does all that mean?
Sure. Well, to break it down, let's start with what contempt is. Contempt of court is a power that our courts have to basically enforce their orders. When someone disobeys a court ruling, if they don't follow the law as the court said it applies, they can issue a fine, a sanction, in extreme cases, and this is very rare, even jail time, to compel compliance until the order is being followed. That's central to our court's independence, its effectiveness, and its long-standing part of our system of checks and balances that courts can do this. But what Congress is saying in this provision is that actually, no, we, the legislative branch, are going to limit how courts can use this contempt power in order to enforce their rulings. And perhaps even more concerningly, they're applying the change retroactively and making it so that, all the orders that are on the books that don't comply with the way this new rule would work, and I'm happy to explain how the new rule would work more specifically, are no longer enforceable through contempt proceedings immediately, overnight.
Well, has this ever happened before at all? Is this just totally new for our country?
Yeah, we are seeing a lot of new, unprecedented challenges for the rule of law, for checks and balances, for the things that we thought, were unacceptable. Suddenly, people are trying to do, and it's pretty dangerous. So we, see this as a congressional overreach, severe congressional overreach into the judicial branch. But it's also being pushed by the executive branch. It's a coordinated assault on judicial independence.
Yeah, because the judicial branch is supposed to be an equal branch of government. And basically here, you're taking away a massive power that the judicial branch is supposed to have. Am I right?
Yes, of course.
Yeah. Well, please go ahead.
Yeah, what it would do is basically say, before a court can use its power to enforce an order, the person who initiating the lawsuit has to pay money, a bond, in order to get that order enforced. And that money has to be paid at the time the order was issued. So, looking forward, that's a barrier to the justice system for folks trying to sue the government to hold it accountable for violating a constitutional right or stopping an unlawful policy. But then by applying that retroactively, they're saying that in all these cases where courts did not require anybody to pay any money because the case was not about money, again, it's about the Constitution, it's about public policy, it's about stopping illegal actions, all those orders where the bond was not posted, immediately unenforceable through the contempt authority. And that's just a dangerous attack on the rule of law.
Yeah, and we've never seen this before. And I keep thinking to myself, if this is enacted, Eric, normally when something is enacted and it's sort of borderline unconstitutional or not really right, it's the courts that weigh in and kind of stop it. And in this case, what do you do? I mean, because the courts can't change. I mean, this is just really unprecedented.
Yeah, it's dangerous. And if this provision gets enacted, it would make it far easier for government officials, including the Trump administration, but not just the Trump administration, to avoid accountability for breaking the law.
Yeah. I mean, we're really assaulting our own constitution, our own way of life, our government right now as it stands with this stupid provision in this bill. And it's not just about we focus on tax policy and the economy and lots of other things, but this gets to the heart of like our government itself in my mind. But that's not the only provision, right? That's really bad in this. There's a 10-year ban on the enforcement of all state and local laws that regulate artificial intelligence, including rules for AI's use in political campaigns. Now that sounds really bad. Tell us about that.
So this one is written really broadly as well, and it's also buried hundreds of pages in there. People who voted for this bill, members of Congress, have admitted they didn't know it was in there when they voted for it in the House, and they would have opposed it if they had known. So what would happen here is basically it's Congress saying no state or locality for 10 years, a decade, can enforce the rules they've passed to regulate artificial intelligence. And there's a few small exceptions built in there, but it's very broad. And as we read it, it would apply to what we at Campaign Legal Center focus on, which is the impact of artificial intelligence on elections. And so it would do a lot more than this, but this is what we're most concerned about. And basically, we've seen how AI is used in politics throughout 2024, the last election cycle, but in more recent years, broadly speaking. And what it can do is make it so that voters don't realize they're seeing fake content. It's deceptively realistic, that lies about what candidates are saying or doing, about events that never actually happened. You have a robocall simulating President Joe Biden's voice, telling voters in New Hampshire to not vote in the primary, to save their vote for November. And you have, in other countries, AI being used to create false admissions of election fraud, which, with all of the truth and trust issues we have in our democracy right now, you can just see how that would spread like wildfire, and it would dangerously undermine states' ability to regulate this. Campaign Legal Center has called on Congress repeatedly to regulate AI in elections with a federal law, protect all of our elections with a safeguard, but they haven't done that. And in that absence, states have stepped up, more than 20 of them, Democratic and Republican alike. And Congress is saying, no, not only are we not going to act, but we're going to interfere with states' rights to protect their own constituents and say you can't enforce those rules that you've passed.
So I have a ton of questions, but I want to make this clear that the AI threat is very real. And you talked about some of these things with fake content, but imagine getting robocall saying that your polling station is under attack, so don't go to the polls. Don't physically go to the polls. Imagine seeing something on social media that says that, or a video that says that there's a bomb threat or something like that, where they don't want you to go to the polls. They're suppressing the vote there, or something from a candidate. You can. I could actually be an AI bot right now. It's that good of a technology to be able to replicate a human being and basically say anything at this point. And to have no regulation on that is just absurd. But my question to you, Eric, is why is this provision in the bill? Like who would be writing something like this in? What is the benefit of not having regulation? To me, this seems like something that's really, really bad.
Yeah, and all those scenarios you just listed are incredibly realistic and very likely to happen if this technology is not regulated. And it's not always going to be somebody like President Biden's voice, who he has a microphone which would say, that wasn't me. But if it's a random poll worker, an election official who nobody knows, how are you going to tell if it's true or not? But in terms of why this is in the bill, as I said, it's written very broadly. It doesn't say no law on AI in elections, but it would apply to AI in elections. And we at Campaign Legal Center also track money in politics, government lobbying, ethics issues. And this sure seems like it's big tech companies that don't want to be regulated. They're saying that, we can't handle a patchwork of laws telling us what we can and can't do with this vital technology for the United States economy. And they have a lot of influence. You saw all these big tech companies with seats front and center at President Trump's second inauguration. You see the influence of their lobbyists on Capitol Hill every year on bills trying to regulate all manner of issues that could affect big tech. And this is just another example of that creates a pretty unique danger for our elections.
Yeah, big tech doesn't want to be regulated. Tell us about the Campaign Legal Center. that you work, that you're very busy right now. What sort of work do you all do, and how important is the work that you do?
So Campaign Legal Center, or CLC, is a nonpartisan organization that works to address the wide variety of challenges facing American democracy. So we do that through litigation, lawsuits in the courts. We do that through policy advocacy, which is what I do. We do that through communications, just try to talk to people about what's going on in our democracy. And when I say the wide range of challenges, I mean things like money in politics, the corrupting influence of unethical lobbying and stock owning and trading by members of Congress, and I mean voting rights and election administration and the rule of law and the independence of our judiciary and checks and balances. So we are very busy because this is an unprecedented time for attacks on all of these things. We're fighting in Congress to stop these bad provisions in the reconciliation package in the budget bill that the House just passed. In the courts, we were one of the first to sue the Trump administration over its executive order to try to change the rules for voter registration in federal elections. And we won a preliminary injunction, a temporary order meant to halt that requirement that people have to provide extreme documentation to prove that they're a citizen before they're allowed to register to vote, which is unnecessary and really just voter suppression. And we won that order, and that's one of the orders that would be made unenforceable by the provision in the lawsuit. So it all connects. Right. And this provision would make it so that we and other nonprofits like this have a harder time holding government actors accountable for wrongdoing.
Yeah, as we're all thinking about what can we do to stop what Trump is trying to do right now. And so many of my friends, so many of us we feel paralyzed. Wow, what can we do? We can protest. We can, your nonprofit, your organization is out there doing the work that we need done, sort of behind the scenes, going to court, challenging everything. And I just want to thank you for doing that. It matters. The rest of us are all watching. Thank you for coming on the show and educating us as to what these provisions are and telling us about the work that you do. We really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me. Thank you for helping us shine the light on this. And so, your listeners, and they can contact their representatives and senators and say, take this stuff out because it's got me.
Yep. Everybody needs to do that, and to tell our neighbors, our friends, all about these really terrible provisions that are hurting our democracy. Thank you, Eric, for being here.